The morning sunlight filtered weakly through the kitchen curtains, glinting off the empty porcelain bowl where my wedding ring used to rest every night. I reached instinctively for it, my fingers brushing only cool air. A strange chill spread through me. That ring had been there for 47 years, since the morning after my wedding. My heart skipped a beat. I turned the bowl upside down, shaking it gently, hoping it might have just slipped beneath the napkin. But it was gone. I heard laughter from the backyard. My son's wife, Anna, was cleaning out boxes and throwing old things into a large black trash bag. She was kind, young, full of energy, always trying to help me declutter. I walked slowly toward the door, every step heavier than the last. "Anna?" I called, forcing a smile. "Have you seen a small gold ring? It was in a bowl by the sink." She frowned, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Oh, that? I think I threw it out with the old things from the shelf. I'm sorry, I thought it was just a cheap trinket." Her words hit me like a knife. My legs trembled. For a second, I couldn't breathe. That ring wasn't just gold. It carried every heartbeat of a love that had survived poverty, illness, and war. It was the last piece of my husband I had left. My voice cracked as I whispered, You threw it away?" Anna's face paled. "I didn't know. I swear I thought it was nothing important." Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the edges of the world around me. I didn't yell. I couldn't. I simply turned away and sat down, my hand instinctively touching the spot on my finger where the ring had always been. It felt like touching a ghost. Anna stood there, frozen with guilt, unaware that she had just erased something irreplaceable. The sound of the garbage truck echoed down the street, and with each rumbling second, I felt my past being crushed piece by piece. I closed my eyes and whispered, "That ring was my husband's promise to me." But Anna didn't know, she couldn't know, the truth buried inside that small circle of gold. What would you do if someone accidentally threw away the most precious thing you owned? That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the garbage truck still echoed in my head, replaying like a cruel lullaby. I sat in my armchair, staring at my bare hand. The spot where the ring once rested looked strangely empty, as if the skin itself missed its familiar touch. Memories began to flood my mind, his laughter, the warmth of his hand, the way he'd slipped that ring on my finger under a sky of endless stars. We married young, against everyone's advice. He was a mechanic, poor, but proud, and I was the daughter of a tailor who wanted more for his only child. My father said a love like ours wouldn't last. Yet we proved him wrong, year after year. That ring wasn't expensive. It was made from his late mother's pendant, melted and shaped by his own hands. It carried fingerprints of sacrifice. I still remember the day he gave it to me. It wasn't in a church or under a fancy arch. It was in his small workshop, the scent of grease and iron heavy in the air. He wiped his hands on a rag, pulled a tiny velvet box from his pocket, and smiled nervously. "It's not perfect," he said, "but neither are we. That's what makes it real." I cried then, not because it was beautiful, but because it was us. Now, decades later, that symbol of everything we survived had vanished into a pile of forgotten trash. Anna didn't understand, and I couldn't bring myself to tell her the full story. She was young, practical, and thought memories lived only in pictures, not in objects. But that ring had witnessed every storm: his illness, our son's birth, the nights I prayed for him to recover. When he died, I kept wearing it as if it kept him close. Some nights, I even pressed it against my lips and whispered goodnight. Losing it felt like losing him all over again. The next morning, I decided to do something unthinkable. I put on my coat, walked out into the cold, and headed toward the landfill. Somewhere in that mountain of discarded lives, my love was buried. The wind cut through my coat as I reached the edge of the landfill. The stench of decay hit me like a wall-rotting food, plastic, and the heavy, wet scent of wasted lives. Trucks came and went, dumping the remains of other people's days. I hesitated for a moment, clutching the small photograph of my husband I'd brought with me. His smile stared back at me, steady, warm. "I'm coming for you," I whispered. A worker noticed me and frowned. "Ma'am, you can't be here. It's dangerous. I'm just looking for something," I said, my voice trembling. "A gold ring. It's small, but it means everything to me." He sighed, shaking his head. "Lady, there are tons of garbage here every hour. Once it's buried, it's gone." His words were final, like a door slamming shut. But I couldn't leave. I walked past the warning signs, boots sinking into the mud. I began searching through the piles, lifting broken glass, torn clothes, and half-eaten food. Each handful felt like digging through my own grief. My fingers bled, but I didn't care. I needed to find it. A memory struck me. Then our last night together. He was lying in the hospital bed, breathing slow, his hand weak in mine. He touched the ring and whispered, "If anything ever happens, promise me you'll keep it close. It's where my soul rests when I'm gone." I had promised, and now that promise was buried beneath mountains of trash. After hours of searching, exhaustion took over. My knees buckled and I sat down in the filth, tears mixing with dirt. The worker approached again, holding a flashlight. He hesitated, then handed me a bottle of water. "You can't find everything you lose," he said softly. "Sometimes. You just have to let go." But how could I let go of him? That ring was the last thread between our worlds. I closed my eyes, praying. "If you can hear me," I whispered, "show me the way." And then, through the flickering light of the landfill, something shimmered faintly beneath a torn piece of fabric. I crawled toward the faint shimmer, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the buzzing flies and distant engines. My hands trembled as I lifted the filthy fabric, revealing a shard of metal glinting under the sun. For a heartbeat, I thought it was my ring. But when I brushed the dirt away, disappointment sank. Deep, it was only the broken lid of an old can. My hope flickered, then dimmed like a dying candle. Still, something inside me refused to stop. I kept digging, praying under my breath, whispering his name like a chant. "Miguel, help me find it." I didn't care about the cold or the smell anymore. Every handful of trash was another step back into the past, another attempt to hold on to the man who once held me when the world was falling apart. My hands were raw, my back ached, and my eyes burned from the stinging smoke of nearby fires. The worker who had warned me earlier stood watching in silence. Finally, he sighed and joined me, moving debris with his shovel. He didn't ask why, he just helped. Maybe he saw in me the kind of grief that words can't fix. After what felt like hours, the shovel struck something solid. We both froze. He bent down, brushed the dirt aside, and picked up a small object. His eyes widened. "Is this it?" There in his gloved palm lay a thin gold circle covered in grime, but unmistakable. My breath caught. My knees gave way as tears blurred my vision. I reached out, cradling it in both hands, my heart aching with relief. "That's it," I whispered. "That's my promise." The worker smiled faintly. Guess love really does have its own kind of luck. I held the ring close to my chest, feeling warmth return to my body, as if Miguel himself had wrapped his arms around me. I thanked the man through sobs, unable to stop crying. But as I wiped away the dirt, I noticed something I'd never seen before, a small engraving on the inside of the ring. Faint, nearly worn away, but visible enough to read, "Until we meet again." My breath caught in my throat. He'd never told me about it. My heart began to race, a strange feeling spreading through me, grief, yes, but also something deeper. Maybe this wasn't just about a lost ring. Maybe he was trying to tell me something. I held the ring against the light, my fingers trembling as I traced the faded inscription, "Until we meet again." My heart pounded harder with every word. Why had he hidden this message from me? Or had I simply never noticed it before? Perhaps it was meant to be discovered only when I was ready, when I needed it the most. That night, I cleaned the ring gently, using warm water and a toothbrush. The gold shone weakly, scarred but beautiful, like love surviving time. I sat by the window, listening to the wind whisper through the curtains. Every creak of the old house felt like his footsteps. Every flicker of light felt like his presence. For the first time in years, I spoke to him aloud. "Did you guide me today?" I asked softly. "Did you lead me to it?" There was no answer, of course, only the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of rain. Yet, deep inside, I felt something, an echo, a warmth. The kind you feel when someone you love sits beside you, even if you can't see them. When Anna came home, her eyes were red from crying. She hesitated by the doorway, clutching a folded blanket. "I heard what you did," she said. "I'm so sorry. I didn't understand." I looked at her for a long moment. She was young, just like I once was, trying to make things right, trying to please everyone, unaware that some things can't be replaced. I took her hand and smiled weakly. "You didn't mean to hurt me, but sometimes when we lose something, we find something else instead." She nodded, tears falling silently. "I'll never forget this, I promise." I turned my gaze back to the ring, feeling the weight of years pressing against my chest. That simple band had survived time, grief, and even death. But the message inside those 4 words felt like more than memory. They felt like a promise renewed. That night, I dreamt of Miguel. He stood in our old workshop, smiling, his hands covered in gold dust. He said nothing, but his eyes, those same eyes that once saw forever in me, seemed to whisper, "You kept your promise." I woke up with tears on my cheeks and a strange peace in my heart. The next morning, I decided to open the old chest that had sat untouched in the attic for years. Dust covered its surface like a blanket of time, and my hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, yellowed letters, and little pieces of our shared life, a theater ticket from our first date, the key to our first home, and the blue ribbon from his uniform. Each item told a story, a fragment of who we were. As I sifted through the memories, I found a small, sealed envelope tucked between 2 photo albums. My name was written in his handwriting, strong, slanted, unmistakably his. The ink was faded, but the sight of it stole my breath. I pressed it to my lips, afraid to open it, afraid that reading his words would mean reliving the pain of losing him. Yet something inside whispered that it was time. With trembling hands, I tore it open. Inside was a short letter, written with the same calm tenderness that had always defined him. "If you're reading this, it means life has taken me where love cannot follow, yet. I don't want you to spend your days searching for me in shadows. Keep the ring, not as a chain to your past, but as proof that love can survive even when people cannot. One day, when the world is quiet again, we'll meet, just as I promised. Until then, live, laugh, and keep me in your prayers." Tears fell onto the paper, blurring the words. He must have written it during those final weeks when he was already fading. He knew how hard it would be for me to let go, so he left behind the only thing that could guide me back to peace: his voice. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the ring. The pieces of my heart began to fit together again, not perfectly, but enough to feel whole. I finally understood. The ring wasn't meant to trap me in grief. It was meant to remind me that love never ends, it only changes form. As I looked out the attic window, a soft ray of sunlight pierced through the clouds, landing directly on the letter. For the first time in years, I smiled without the weight of sorrow. Maybe he truly was still watching over me. After reading his letter, something inside me shifted. I no longer felt trapped inside the walls of our old house. Instead, I felt called to do something with all that love and pain. I walked into the backyard, the same yard where Anna had unknowingly thrown away my ring, and stood by the empty patch of soil where nothing had grown for years. I decided that's where I would build my memory garden. Not to mourn him, but to celebrate him. I spent the following days gathering things that once belonged to us: an old coffee cup from our mornings together, a small photo frame, and a few rusted nails from his workshop. I placed them in the soil like seeds of remembrance and surrounded them with flowers he used to love, white lilies and yellow daffodils. Each petal felt like a word he'd left unsaid, now finally blooming. Anna noticed what I was doing and offered to help. She brought new soil, watering cans, and gardening gloves. Working together in silence, we dug, planted, and shaped the earth. It felt strange, but healing. Two women connected by one man's memory. She looked at me once and whispered, "I think he'd be proud of you." I nodded, my voice trembling. He always loved the garden. He said life is just like this, messy, unpredictable, but worth tending. By evening, the sun cast golden light across the yard. The lilies swayed softly, their fragrance mixing with the smell of fresh soil. I took off the ring, kissed it, and buried it just beneath the flowers. Not to lose it again, but to let it rest, where love could grow instead of fade. As I pressed the soil down, I whispered, "You're home now." A breeze passed through the trees, gentle and warm, brushing against my cheek like his hand once did. For the first time in decades, I didn't cry from pain. I cried from gratitude. When night fell, Anna placed a small wooden sign at the edge of the garden. It read, "In loving memory, love never dies." I touched the letters and smiled through my tears. A few days later, the rain returned after weeks of dry skies. It fell softly at first, then harder, until the world outside turned silver and blurred. I stood by the window, watching the raindrops slide down the glass like tears from the heavens. My garden, our garden, shimmered in the storm, the flowers bending but never breaking. I went outside despite the cold, my coat soaking through, my shoes sinking into the mud. But I didn't care. The rain felt like a baptism, washing away years of sorrow I hadn't even known I was still carrying. I knelt by the lilies, brushing the wet petals gently. Beneath the soil rested the ring, the letter, and a piece of my heart. For the first time since Miguel's death, I didn't feel alone. The rain soaked my hair, ran down my face, and I could almost hear him in the rhythm of the drops, steady, patient, tender. Then something unexpected happened. As lightning flashed across the sky, I noticed a small golden gleam among the flowers. My breath caught. I reached down, and there it was, the ring. Somehow, the rain had unearthed it again, shining brighter than ever. My hands shook as I picked it up, laughing and crying all at once. Anna came running from the house, umbrella in hand. "You're going to catch a cold," she shouted. But when she saw the ring in my palm, her eyes widened. "It came back?" I nodded, tears mingling with the rain. It seems he wasn't ready to let go just yet. We stood there together, the storm raging around us, the ring glimmering between my fingers like a heartbeat that refused to die. It was as if the earth itself had decided to return what I had given away. A final sign, a whisper from the man who had always kept his promises. As thunder rolled across the hills, I looked up and smiled through the rain. "I hear you," I whispered. "I'll never stop hearing you." And for the first time in so long, the ache in my chest turned into something softer, not pain, but peace. That night, I placed the ring on the windowsill beside a lit candle. Its golden surface reflected the soft flame, dancing like a heartbeat. The storm had passed, leaving behind the faint scent of wet earth and lilies drifting through the open window. I felt calm, lighter somehow, as if something invisible had been lifted from my shoulders. But as I looked at the ring, I realized this piece carried a quiet message. It was time to say goodbye. I sat down and opened my photo album, turning each page slowly. There we were, young, foolish, wildly in love, laughing under the sun. There he was, holding our newborn son for the first time. And there, much later, with gray hair and tired eyes, still smiling at me as if time had never touched us. Each photo was a world of its own, frozen, yet alive. I whispered to him as if he were still beside me. "You kept every promise. You even sent me back the ring." My voice broke. Maybe now it's my turn to keep one, to keep living. When I looked back at the candle, its flame flickered once, twice, then steadied again. I took it as a sign. The house felt full, not of emptiness, but of presence. His jacket still hung behind the door, his books still lined the shelf, and his laughter still echoed faintly in the corners of my mind. But for the first time, I didn't cling to them in pain. I cherished them in gratitude. Later that night, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done since he passed. Today, I realized love doesn't need to end to let us move on. It can live quietly inside us, guiding every breath. I placed the journal next to the candle and kissed the ring once more before setting it beside the photograph of our wedding day. "Good night, my love," I whispered. Not goodbye, just good night. The wind rustled through the garden, and I swore I heard a faint reply carried in the breeze. "Until we meet again." A week later, Anna suggested we visit Miguel's grave together. I hadn't been there in years. For the longest time, I couldn't bear the thought of seeing his name carved in stone, of standing above the earth that separated us. But something in me had changed. It was no longer fear that filled me. It was longing, the kind that doesn't hurt anymore. I agreed. The cemetery was quiet, blanketed in the soft hum of wind through the trees. Fallen leaves crunched beneath our feet as we walked toward the far corner, where his grave rested beneath an old oak. My hands trembled slightly as I knelt down, brushing away the leaves that had gathered on the headstone. The engraved letters read, "Miguel Ramos, 1947 to 2012. Beloved husband, father, dreamer." I smiled faintly. He had always called himself a dreamer, the kind of man who believed that love could fix anything. I placed the ring beside the headstone, its gold gleaming softly under the afternoon sun. "You came back to me," I whispered. "But now, I'm giving you back what was always yours." Anna stood quietly behind me, her hand resting on my shoulder. "He must have been a wonderful man," she said softly. "He was," I replied, tears stinging my eyes. "He taught me that love isn't something you find, it's something you build, one choice at a time." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of lilies from the garden at home. I closed my eyes and felt the warmth of the sun on my skin. It was strange, but in that moment, I didn't feel like I was standing over a grave. I felt like I was standing beside him, alive, close, eternal. Before leaving, I took one last look at the ring. The light caught it perfectly, sending a small ray toward the clouds above, as if signaling him. "Until we meet again," I whispered one last time. As we walked back to the car, Anna slipped her hand into mine. For the first time, she didn't feel like just my son's wife. She felt like the daughter I never had. And somehow, I knew Miguel had something to do with that too. That evening, as I sat by the window again, I couldn't stop thinking about how the ring had found its way back to me, only to return to him. It felt poetic, almost divine, like a circle completed. Love, after all, has no beginning or end. Still, something inside me wondered how many hands, how many roads that little band of gold had crossed before it reached me again. A few days later, Anna came to me holding an old photo she found inside a drawer. "Look," she said, handing it to me. It was Miguel, younger, standing beside a friend I barely remembered, the jeweler who had helped him melt the pendant to forge my ring. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, was written, A promise made in fire never breaks. The words made me shiver. Miguel had always said that gold is tested by fire, just like love. Maybe that's why he'd made our ring with his own hands. He wanted something that could endure both heat and time. And maybe, when it was lost and then found again, it was the universe reminding me that what's meant for us will always find its way back. That night, I sat with Anna in the garden, telling her the full story, how Miguel made the ring, how we built our life from nothing, and how love had survived even death. She listened with tears streaming down her face, holding my hand tightly. I'll never look at love the same way again, she whispered. I smiled through my tears. That's the thing about love. When it's real, it doesn't end. It teaches. The stars above us glimmered faintly, and the lilies swayed with the breeze. Somewhere in that quiet moment, I realized the ring's journey wasn't about losing or finding. It was about remembering. Remembering that love isn't trapped in an object. It lives in every act of kindness, every memory, every lesson passed down. When I looked at Anna, I saw a reflection of my younger self, hopeful, fragile, trying to understand what love truly means. Maybe that was Miguel's final gift. Not the ring itself, but the story it carried. Weeks passed, and the garden bloomed brighter than ever. The lilies opened fully, their white petals gleaming like light itself. I spent my mornings watering them, whispering prayers, and watching the sun rise exactly the way Miguel loved, slow, golden, and patient. Anna joined me most days, and together we tended to every flower as if caring for something sacred. Somewhere between the soil and the silence, grief transformed into something gentler, legacy. One morning, as we sat on the porch sipping tea, Anna said quietly, you should tell this story. People need to hear it. I laughed softly. Who would want to hear an old woman ramble about a lost ring? She smiled. Everyone who's ever loved someone and had to say goodbye. Her words stayed with me. That night, I opened my notebook again, the one I used to write in when Miguel was alive. This time, I wrote not for myself, but for those who'd someday feel the same kind of ache. The kind that doesn't fade, but teaches you how to live with an open heart. I wrote about our beginnings, our struggles, and that rainy day when the earth gave my ring back. I wrote about Anna, and how forgiveness can bloom in unexpected soil. I wrote about loss not as an ending, but as love changing shape. When I finished the last page, I placed the notebook on the table beside the framed photo of us, my younger face beside his, both smiling like tomorrow was guaranteed. That night, I dreamed again of Miguel. He stood in our garden, the flowers glowing around him. He looked at me, eyes filled with warmth, and said, "You did it. You kept living." I reached out, and for a moment, I felt his hand, real, solid, warm. Then he faded into light, leaving behind only the scent of lilies and the echo of his laughter. When I awoke, tears soaked my pillow, but this time they were peaceful. Love had come full circle, and I finally understood what he meant in that letter. To live, even when love hurts, is to keep it alive. A month later, Anna surprised me with a small wrapped box. "Open it," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. Inside was a freshly printed book, my book. The title read, "Until We Meet Again, a story of love that never died." I gasped, my hands trembling as I traced the embossed letters on the cover. She smiled. "I took your writings to a friend who works at a local press. I thought your story deserved to live beyond these walls." I couldn't speak. My eyes filled with tears as I flipped through the pages, each one carrying pieces of my heart, my memories, my pain turned into something beautiful. "Anna," I whispered, "you gave me back my voice." She took my hand and said softly, "No, you gave it to yourself. I just helped others hear it. In the following weeks, something extraordinary happened. People began reading the book, neighbors, friends, even strangers from the church. Letters arrived at my doorstep from women who had lost husbands, from sons who had never said goodbye, from young people afraid of loving too deeply. They all wrote the same thing. Your story gave me hope. Each letter felt like a thread connecting my life to theirs, weaving a tapestry of shared healing. One day, I sat by the window reading one of them. A young widow wrote, "Your ring may have been lost and found, but your story found me when I was lost." My heart swelled. That's when I realized Miguel's legacy wasn't buried in the garden or sealed in gold. It was alive in every person my story touched. One evening, Anna and I hosted a small gathering in the garden. Candles lined the paths, and we read passages from the book under the starlit sky. I spoke about love, not the perfect kind, but the kind that endures storms, distance, and death. As I finished, I looked up and whispered, "Do you see this, my love? You're still here, in every heart that listens." The breeze stirred the lilies gently, and for a moment, I felt that familiar warmth, his presence, smiling in approval. Months passed and life began to move gently, like a slow river after a long storm. I had grown older, slower, but lighter. The pain that once shadowed every morning had softened into a quiet companion. One afternoon, while organizing old drawers, I found a small wooden box I didn't remember ever seeing before. It was tucked beneath layers of fabric, sealed with a ribbon long faded to gray. My name was carved delicately on the lid, Alina. My heart fluttered. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it carefully. Inside was a silver chain, and hanging from it, a tiny gold charm shaped like a heart. But what caught my breath wasn't the charm. It was the folded piece of paper beneath it. I recognized his handwriting instantly. My eyes blurred as I began to read. "For the day when you're ready to let me go, but not forget. Wear this close to your heart. When it warms, know that I'm near." I clutched the necklace against my chest, sobbing quietly. It felt as if time itself had stopped to let me feel his love one last time. He had planned this. He'd known that someday I'd be strong enough to remember him without breaking. I put the necklace on, and as the metal touched my skin, I felt a sudden warmth spread across my heart. I gasped softly, smiling through tears. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe it was his final embrace. That evening, I stood in the garden wearing the necklace, the scent of lilies surrounding me. The sky turned orange and gold, the way it used to when he'd hold me close after a long day. I whispered, "You never stopped loving me, did you?" And in the rustle of the leaves, I swore I heard his voice, tender and full of life, not even for a second. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I closed my eyes and smiled. I no longer felt the weight of goodbye, only the peace of forever. The years rolled by, and the garden became more than a place of memory. It became a living story. Children came to visit, running between the flowers, laughing where once only silence lived. The lilies grew taller, brighter each season, as if fed by love itself. I grew older too, my hands marked by time, my steps slower, but my heart still steady, still full. Every morning I sat by the same window, the necklace warm against my skin, and whispered the same words that had carried me through every loss, every dawn, until we meet again. Anna would visit often, bringing her little daughter, my granddaughter. The child's eyes sparkled like Miguel's, full of curiosity and kindness. One day, she found my book on the shelf and asked, "Grandma, is this your story?" I smiled softly. "It's our story, my dear. It's about love, the kind that never goes away." She climbed into my lap, her tiny fingers tracing the photo of Miguel and me on the cover. "Will I find love like that someday?" she asked. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "If you lead with kindness, you already have." That night, as the moonlight spilled across the garden, I felt the gentle pull of sleep, deeper, softer than ever before. I lay in bed, the scent of lilies drifting through the window, and I thought of him. The workshop. The laughter, the rain, the ring. Everything that had once felt like loss now felt like home. My breathing slowed, peaceful, like a tide returning to the sea. In the dream that followed, I stood once again in the garden, young and light, wearing the same dress from our wedding day. Miguel waited at the gate, smiling, his hand outstretched. "You took your time," he teased gently. I laughed, stepping toward him. I had to make sure our story lived on. He nodded, eyes shining. It did. And so did you. As we walked together through the blooming lilies, hand in hand, the world faded into light. And for the first time in forever, there was no pain, no distance, only peace. Because love, real love, doesn't end when life does. It simply finds another way to begin again. Do you believe that somewhere, somehow, all great loves meet again?